Howdy y'all. I am looking forward to getting into chapter 3 as we look to analyze the internal organization. As we move through this chapter, I want you to pay attention specifically to this second part of the analysis portion of simply understanding an organization's position and what it is capable of doing as we prepare to discuss the different strategies that could be done with the resources, with the capabilities that organizations have. So with this chapter, we are looking at the internal organization, resources, capabilities, core competencies, and ultimately competitive advantages. So I want to go back to the definition from chapter 1 of core competencies. These are capabilities that serve as a source of competitive advantage for a firm over its rivals. Now, we can talk about core competencies. We can see how some of those things change. And to give you that, I want to look at an example here. So Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Of course, we know Henry Ford for introducing the assembly line to automobile manufacturing, bringing the price down and making automobiles something that would be an accessible transportation option for many people. Prior to this, there were capabilities that ranchers and buggy makers had for training and raising horses, for making the buggies, making the wheels. They were still capable of doing all of those things. In fact, you could say that they had core competencies, many of them. There would have been certain manufacturers that were better and more successful than others. But once the automobile overtook this, those core competencies no longer provided a competitive advantage. So we will see capabilities that at times may be a core competence, but at other times may fail to do that, even though the capability itself remains. So again, core competencies are the capabilities that serve as a source of competitive advantage. So if you remember from chapter 2, we were looking at the external environment. We're looking at what a firm might choose to do based on everything outside the economic environment, looking at competitors, looking at different things like that. Things that happen outside of the organization can provide opportunities. Some firms are capable of taking advantage of those opportunities. Other firms are not. The other thing to consider there is threats. Some firms are going to be threatened by certain changes or certain characteristics of the external environment where other firms may not. So ultimately, by studying the external environment, firms identify what they might choose to do. When we look at the internal environment, we look at what they actually can do. What are they actually capable of doing? So in today's global economy, some of the resources that were traditionally critical to firms' efforts to produce, sell, and distribute their goods or services are now less likely to be the source of competitive advantage. For example, international production is now available to more firms, including very small startups. You can create something, you can create some type of a product and find a manufacturer that is able to help you to be cost effective. Another thing is that technology can reduce entry barriers and help overcome resource disadvantages. Again, a very small startup could sell a product, could sell a service, and be able to reach people in ways that would mostly have only been available to larger companies and more successful, stronger companies before. Firms should also use a global mindset to analyze their internal organization. Is there something going on in your organization that's a challenge? And as you work on improving the internal organization, consider what you might be able to accomplish by having part of your work done in different parts of the world that might fit your value chain, that might fit your organization. So when we look at the components of an internal analysis, we look at the resources that provide capabilities. The capabilities that are most important are the core competencies. And then when we look at core competencies, we will look at ways to analyze those, to see which of them may be sustainable or not, to look at other ways that organizations might be able to accomplish their goals. And ultimately, this leads to competitive advantage and competitiveness. So by exploiting their core competencies or competitive advantages, firms create value. Value itself can be measured by product performance characteristics, a faster car, a warmer jacket. We can actually measure much of that. And those are things that people want to pay for. We may also look at product attributes for which customers will pay. Some people will pay more for one particular product than they will for another. And so organizations need to find ways to provide value. Another way to provide value is simply by charging less. Maybe your product is not as high quality as a competing product, but people still want to pay for it because it costs less. This is also valuable to customers. So firms create value by innovatively building and leveraging their resources to form capabilities and core competencies. These capabilities differ across organizations. Some organizations have cost advantages. Some may have strengths in providing quality or being innovative or having better customer service. Firms should leverage what they do well and what their resources allow them to accomplish. Intended value creation characteristics influence a firm's choice of business level strategy, which we'll discover, or which we'll discuss in chapter 4, as also the firm's organizational structure, which we will be discussing in multiple chapters really throughout the semester. So core competencies in combination with product market positions are the firm's most important sources of competitive advantage. Firm strategy should be influenced by its core competencies. The strategic decisions that managers make about the internal organization are non-routine, have ethical implications, multiple people will be affected by those, and these also influence the firm's ability to earn above average returns. Making decisions regarding the firm's assets involves identifying, developing, deploying, and protecting resources, capabilities, and core competencies. These decisions are also increasingly internationalized as firms use a global mindset to achieve their goals. A firm can improve by studying its mistakes. The learning generated by correcting mistakes can be important to the creation of new capabilities and core competencies. This can lead to new innovation. This can help organizations and even industries to become better over time. So there are 3 conditions that affect managers as they analyze the internal organization and make decisions about those resources. One of those is uncertainty. We don't always know what different decisions will lead to. These can be very complex. There are a lot of moving parts. If you think of a company like Disney and many CEOs not wanting to take over a company like Disney, one of the reasons is the complexity. There's a lot going on, and only very few people would be able to manage all of that. We also have intra-organizational conflict. There are different departments, different areas within many organizations that may disagree on the right strategy moving forward. And so managers need to be able to manage that and address those challenges to ultimately come up with the decisions that the company will need to move forward. So your first question here is, I want you to describe the value that you pay for at either In-N-Out, Olive Garden, or Ruth's Chris. Describe how customers value the food, the service, the price, or other characteristics of one of these restaurants, not all 3. And then as you discuss that and interact in the chat board, I want you to, or the discussion board, I want you to perhaps think about how these would differ in responding and discussing with one another.